Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our panel, Mr. Mohammed Awadallah, CEO of Time Hotels. Please come to stage. Pleasure, Mr. Mohammed. Mrs. Hala Matar Shufani, President of Middle East and Africa HVS. Welcome, welcome.
Hi.
It's a pleasure, please. And David Daniels, Director of Architecture from SSH. It's a pleasure. Tariq Dawouk, Founder and Managing Partner at Smart Hotels, Hospitality International. It's a pleasure. Please. So this year is about focus. And for myself and other investors and owners within the audience, we want to really get a focused understanding of value engineering. So I'll start with you, Hala. What is value engineering? What are the components of value engineering? Is it a Ferrari built with a Toyota budget? So what do you think?
Why did you start with me? You know, the subject is very dear to my heart, and I could talk for hours. But no, I must say, I mean, this is really a focal point that listening to these heated conversations that were very interesting over the last 3 days, it really boils down to what we're going to discuss today. And, you know, I don't want to be in anyone's shoes because as an independent advisor, financial advisor, I'm looking at the operator, the investor, and every party that is involved, and everyone is protecting their interests in a way or other. And you know, what we do every day of our life is what we call value enhancement, value optimization, whatever we want to call it, it does come down to value engineering.
Sure.
So just to keep it simple, I mean, we look at any opportunity with a triangle. It is a triangle. It is basically on the investment side. Where is our location? What is our site? What are the demand generators and what are we building? And are we spending the right amount of money to actually develop a product where there is someone out there willing to pay? So that's one, you know, at the top.
Yep. So can we that's interesting, especially starting with the investment part and starting with choosing the right location. So can we value engineer the location, the site? Mr. Mohammed, how do you choose your sites, your locations? Is there something called value engineering for that?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah,
thank you, Hala. It's actually a very good subject today. And good afternoon, everybody. Value engineering, we believe, as an operator, is one of the most important things in the. It should be start in the ground before even the location and the project what you want to put in this land. And to be honest, in the Middle East, we are not everybody doing this. So that's why sometimes the operator involve and try to discuss with the owner what's the best for this location, like a hotel apartment, deluxe, standard, maybe it can be a residence, or whatever, but we have to break it down for him to make it easy and to get the return of investment what we promised to have.
So that's about the product offering. So is it going to be maybe a mid-scale hotel? Is it going to be a furnished apartment in that location? How do you choose?
It's all depend of location. I mean, I don't know if you tell me a location now, where is the location? I can tell you after a few study or few reports. I can tell you what it will be best for this location, and this should be a must even by government or by municipality to ask for this value engineering before approving any project, because this will protect the investor himself. If he put the right project or hotel in this in his piece of land, he will get the right money he spent.
Yeah, Tariq, investors, when I talk to them, they say, we want to start with a luxury hotel, so go choose the land. Or this is the land that we have, build us a luxury hotel. What do you think, and how do these dynamics come together? Does it make sense?
No. It doesn't. I came out to Dubai in 2014, and I spent 3 months looking for sites.
Yep.
And I think if you recall, Hala, I came to see you and we were talking about, just the dynamics of every sub-market within Dubai. I mean, if you look at Dubai over the last 40 years, it's really developed, and the hospitality market has developed quite a bit. And so we have like clear pockets of hotel markets and with different dynamics. And so that's one thing to look at. And then the second is obviously the cost of the land. And really when I went out to the market back in 2014, the one thing I realized is that there was a huge discrepancy between the cost of land and the type of product that you needed to build within that particular location. And the challenge you have in a market like Dubai is unfortunately the lack of transparency when it comes to transactions, because everyone wants to keep to themselves the price of the land, and so that's where it becomes a bit challenging in terms of identifying the right property, the right location for the right type of property.
Yeah.
So to answer your question, it's not about here's my property, let's go out and build a luxury. It's much more than that. There's so many layers you need to look at, and that's why it's important that before you even go into any hotel development, you ensure that the proper analysis and the proper kind of research is done to make sure that you are delivering the right products.
Yep.
Yeah.
David, does the location or the land factor in to the design process from the investment side?
Definitely. I mean, for us as a practice, context is probably the first thing that we actually start with. Obviously, the feasibility studies factor a lot of what the hotel is going to function and look like, materiality-wise, spatially, things like that. But the context of the site, that's probably one of the most important elements. If you have a beachside residence, it's going to factor massively into the design of the hotel and how it operates.
Yep.
I mean, if it's a mountainside, then obviously it's going to be different.
Yeah.
It's also going to, if you've got a plot which is sat between existing buildings, naturally it's going to become something that's probably more set back, more intimate. So yeah, context for us is a massive driver.
Hala, is it true that when we factor in the land price, all financial models are for investment break up?
Not necessarily, but I mean, back to your question, obviously there are sites that are not suitable. I wouldn't qualify them as bad sites. We were asked to come in and asset manage a property that is existing up and running, and it is what we would describe a secondary location with a 4-star operator and a 6-star finishing.
Yeah.
So obviously this is the triangle I was talking about. It's a whole lot of mismatch. Now forget about what is there now. That site is a prime site for a budget hotel that is attached to the mall, because that mall is a mid-range mall. And in those locations, no, obviously the cost of land is not going to kill the project. So, again, back to his point, if you are looking to develop mid-scale hotel, you may not necessarily be looking at prime locations and prime site. You are in a different demand generator zone. But yes, I mean, again, this is a whole other discussion in the Middle East. How do we value land? Oftentimes, the lands are not necessarily valued in what we perceive to be in a transactional way. And therefore, if your cost of land is suddenly 50% of your total development cost, your IRR is going to either be reduced or even show a negative. It becomes even more difficult when we're asked not to include land in the development, which obviously doesn't make sense.
The cost of land is, let's say, the weakest link within the value engineering process, or
I wouldn't necessarily agree. I still think essentially from an investment, the cost of land, the cost of build.
Yep.
I mean, it's all very good to have a lot of fancy design, but we've sat on a lot of value engineering exercises that before you know it, you've saved 40% on total cost and increased IRR from 6 to 10%.
Yeah, so
Significant reductions, and you're still delivering the right product.
Yeah.
okay. So you think the best area to, let's say, value engineer our product or offering is in the construction costs? Let's say.
I think it's in all. even in the technology side, in the building, in the material used, in the design, in everything. And I believe if they start from the beginning, as Hala just mentioned, you can go to a big amount of saving. That it can reach to 60%. I totally agree.
Yeah, but owners, they usually, well, after they do their feasibility study, they put it aside, then they go to David and tell them, I want to design something fancy, something unique, something out of this world. And they forget about the budget. So how does it work with you? What do you think is the best, let's say, trade-off, or what do you advise your clients?
Every architect loves to have an unlimited budget, but if you're a
Yeah.
sensible architect, you know that doesn't exist. The reality is you'll spend so much time designing spectacular things, and then as soon as the QS comes in and tells the client it's going to be 100% above your budget or whatever, the worst thing you can do then is use value engineering as a tool, not as it's what it's intended to be, but to use it as a cost-cutting exercise, because then your product you get at the end isn't anything that actually matches what the brief is. The way we like to work from an integrated design point of view is exactly what the panelists were saying, is about throughout the entire process, we're always watching what we're designing. We're always designing in a manner that we're not adding things or subtracting things. They're integral throughout the process. Structural engineering, a massive element. There is large amounts of money if you design the product in a particular manner or in a specific way, that large swathes of money can be saved on the structure. MEP, if it's integrated properly, if it's actually designed from the outset with the architecture, with the structure, savings can be made there. Or not savings, optimizations, I hate that word savings, but optimizations so that it's efficient. And that for me is really what value engineering is. It's about creating efficient design. Design which offers something to the product after it's completed as well, you know. Looking into the future of how the product is going to actually be utilized, how it can be flexible, as you were saying, you know, there are some sites where there's a 4-star and actually it should be a 3-star, and design should be done in such a way that it allows for that change in the future, that growth and that development, because areas of cities do change. Customer dynamics change. And so if the hotel is designed, or the asset is designed at the beginning with that flexibility in mind, then that's how I see as an architect added value being created.
Yeah, so featuring it, as a contractor, personally, we are squeezed in usually between the owners, the designers, and the operators. So the designers are adamant about their designs. They don't want to change anything. The owners, they come to us shouting, we need to lower the cost, we need to lower the cost, value engineer the material, value engineer the design. So how does the flexibility of the operators thought, how does it factor in? Do the operators, let's say, need to be more flexible with the owners, with the designers, about abiding by the brand standards?
I mean, what's great about the large, if you want to call them 5, 6 global hotel players, is that they are and they have been real estate owners in the past, so they understand real estate. That doesn't mean, though, that it kind of changes their view on what they want at a property. I mean, operators are always looking for what's easy for them to operate, and they sometimes forget the impact of what that cost would be to the owner or to the investor. So I think really what's important is to figure out ways to align everyone's interests. So you talk about the contractor, the investor, and the operator. I think what's key really is to ensure that before even the project starts, that everyone agrees to what's being developed. And really have a proper alignment from every party involved. I think when operators do put money on the table, that helps quite significantly as well. As Smart Hotels, we are an owner-operator, so we are vested in Forum Hotel, which is our first property here in Dubai. Well, not here, but in Dubai. And the reason why we are invested is because we want to ensure that we are aligned with our broader investor group. And with that, obviously, it helped facilitate our conversations as an operator for what we require or what we need the property. So I'll give you an example, which is quite interesting. So we have a rooftop pool at our property, and initially the designer looked at it and said, yeah, we just want to make it a bit smaller so that we have more space for sunbeds. And the view really was, well, I mean, if it's going to be a small pool, the rooftop, then why even have a pool? So we took a very different view on what we should do from a design perspective. Ultimately, we have a 22-meter length pool where it's a proper pool where you can properly swim in a property on a plot that's 1,100 square meters. So this is the type of dialogue that all the various parties need to have together in order to ensure alignment and then obviously drive value, which is the end goal of every player. Now, designers, they're quite unique, but you have some designers that understand hotels more than others, and obviously, I would recommend for any developer or contractor is to really identify those designers that truly understand how hotels operate.
Yep. Thank you for that. The investors, some of the investors that we talk to, they want to cut costs, the construction costs. So what they do is that, all right, we don't want an asset manager, we don't want a lead consultant on board. Let's get the contractor. Let's buy the material for the contractor and let him do the execution. Is that a reliable model? We have some people here actually that managed their construction by themselves. So what do you think?
I mean, this will always happen, and especially here in the Middle East. You cannot change. I mean, the only things you can try to correct or to advise or educate the owner to change, but sometimes you cannot, and that's why we have few mistakes in the hotel, and especially, I mean, I'm sorry, even in Dubai. I mean, there is a big establishment. They have major mistakes in operation because they did not consult or they did not listen to the professionals in the earlier stage, which they're correcting now. And even us, we have some example where things are built and it's totally wrong. But yeah, it's difficult. This is what I'm facing, unless one of my colleagues has a different opinion.
No, I'd definitely add to that. I mean, when we're talking about value engineering, is that the operator's input and architects and designers that have worked with hotel is very important. The downside of this conversation is, as well, if we overvalue engineer a project.
Yep.
And therefore, once it's open and running, it is quite inefficient that the operator is not able to perform and devalues the assets. So upfront, we've made savings, but on exit, we've actually devalued the asset. Hence why this whole value engineering has to have an end goal of value optimization, and finding that sort of balance is really key in that equation.
Sorry, I just want to add this because this is very important, because a lot of us, especially operator or any even in a human being, we just say, oh, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. But you have to explain why it's wrong. And this is the key. And some of the owners, they understand when you explain to them after operation, if you open and this door will hit that and will break that and it will not reach the right service to the clients, he will understand. But from the beginning, and you start to argue, and he's the owner, the owner jacket, and you have to operator, and it's my standard, and the conflict start.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I would say there's also an important distinction to make, which is there's a difference between ego capital and smart capital.
Yeah.
And it's important that, capital remains smart and not ego-driven. Now, it's not at the end of the day, people may always tell you, well, yeah, I mean, I've made my wealth because I'm smart, and so I know what I'm doing. But I think what I mean by smart capital is really a capital investor, that really understands the various players involved and finds a way to align all these investors, all these players. And so, to your point earlier, which is, we have this site, we want a luxury hotel, and this is usually ego-driven.
Yeah.
And so, then the question is, does it make sense? And that's where sometimes there's a shortfall. And you see a lot of these examples throughout the world. It's not only the Middle East.
Yeah, but this is a
And-
mistake of the big operators because sometimes, including us, because sometimes we signed and still signed, and he
Yeah.
know that this project is not right for
Yeah.
this space of land,
Yeah.
and still approve it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Why?
I mean, you see, you could see a property, for
Yeah.
instance,
It's true.
that's
It's
built,
unbelievable.
that's built out as a resort, but it doesn't have a beach. In a city that's predominantly beach-driven from a leisure perspective. So you know that it's going to struggle. So there are ways to, I think from the point of our discussion today, value engineering has to start from the beginning. And it's at every stage of the process, up until even down to where the operator has to value engineer the way they operate. And even in terms of how they target their customers, whether it's in terms of their market segmentation and how they go out to get the business. Do we have high reliance on online travel agents? Do we build a strong business so that we can base business so we can yield more throughout the year? That's all value engineering.
David, do you think that the owners should give the process of value engineering to the designers or the contractors?
I think to both of them.
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of the things. It's successful projects is generally when the team is very close and collaborative, communication is strong. Or
It's not our side and their side.
and it should never
and
be
we're-
like that. I think the closer the relationship between a contractor, a client, an operator, a designer, the engineers, the closer that team is, the more collaborative that team is, the more open to suggestions from each party, the better the product is at the end. Because it's like, if you go to your doctor, he'll tell you what the big picture is, your general practitioner, but he'll send you to a specialist to tell you, if your ears are wrong or your eyes are wrong. If you come to me as an architect, I can tell you what the big picture is, but I'll send you to my structural engineer to tell you how thick a column should be. And so you have to listen to that professional. So for me, the statement of who should it belong to, the contractor or to the designer, I don't buy into that philosophy at all, because there should be a relationship as early as possible between the contractor and the designers. Because there will be things in the market that the contractor will know that as a designer, we have no visibility of. And vice versa, because of the design aesthetic of a building, because of the spatial flows of a building, there are things that a designer will know that a contractor doesn't understand. Working together, there's a middle ground that needs to be reached, rather than the extremes from each end of it, which is what happens if it's given to one or the other. Is you get the extremes of that profession.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Ismail, if I can add, it's also very important to continue to have your financial advisors on board, especially for complex mixed-use developments. Any change, whether on the contracting side, architecture, should be plugged in back into the financial modeling to understand where is the uplift in revenue, if at all, and how does that impact the IRR? Because to asset manage after the development is complete, something different than the basis of why this development was made is very difficult.
Yep. Sure.
Yeah, you're right. If I may add,
Yeah,
I
sure.
think, as you said, it has to be all together. But the value engineer, it should be the first, because he will tell him what to do in this piece of land or in this project, the right things to do. And then everybody has to have a meeting and move forward. And I believe, from here, it should be even by governmental issue that you cannot approve any construction till you have the value engineering report.
Yeah, I
like
think-
Europe,
I think
you cannot
there's-
start a report
I think there's
project.
an interesting connotation for everyone in this room to keep in mind. The higher cost of capital that you have, the higher the degree of value engineering is necessary. It's a direct correlation. So if you're an operator, the higher the fees that you want to try and achieve, whether it's from your base or incentive or other fees, the higher the importance of value engineering is. And it's really simple.
Very.
So, if everyone has that view, then to what we were saying earlier, it's about how you explain it to the party you're dealing with, to basically essentially convince them that your recommendations are to everyone's benefit.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. Does anyone have questions in the audience?
No,
Please.
no.
Can we have the mic over here, please?
We can move for. No, not.
I just have a very quick question for David. Value engineering seems to be a corrective actions, but there's not a lot of preventive action, so it's reversing the word, engineering value. And to the point, in many industries, they're using building information modeling to optimize building and achieve that. How much of that is actually incorporated into the design profession today? Not necessarily in your own firm, in general. And the second question is, ALA and other consultants spend a lot of time doing feasibility studies, and their revenue are derived by a certain space program recommended according to the demand of that asset type. How much importance do you give to the revenue side of things when you start changing a design?
Okay, so first off, we'll touch on to the BIM thing. BIM is relatively young in our industry. It is picking up a lot of gravitas and a lot of speed. It is becoming far more prevalent without the industry. It's something at SSH we use, we put great onus on, especially because we're multidisciplinary. So it helps us from a term of actual coordination and from a realization of a design, actually making it feasible, making it actually buildable. And what it also does, which we're trying to push further into the market, is it gives more cost certainty as well, because it's very easy to measure from a BIM model. It's much more accurate and it's much more easier to get the information out of rather than physically measuring things and that with the QS and that. It also allows us to actually continuously measure as we go along if the team is set up correctly. And that's another thing really. The QS usually only appears at the end of each stage of design. The reality is that QS should be throughout the life cycle of the design process, and he should be constantly reporting into the other bodies to say what his findings are and recommendations are. To touch on the client's feasibility and their revenue streams defined by the space planning, that for us is very important. I mean, that drives the design. There are architects, there are designers in the world that design beautiful, iconic buildings, and on the inside of it, they try and just force everything back in. For us, it's the other way around. We're quite traditional in that sense, that form follows function. So the space planning, to be honest, you know, the moment you arrive at a building, yes, there is a moment of wow, but it's how you experience the inside of a building that actually matters to the guest. So for us, the space planning feasibility is very, very important. And when that changes, that change generally, I would say, on a lot of our buildings isn't by ourselves. It's generally because the feasibility has been evolving and the client or the operator has requested something to make that change. So, yeah.
Thank you, David. We've run out of time today. Thank you for your support here. I heard that we have some very good news today.
Yeah.
So congratulations on signing the next deal for Smart Hotels.
Yeah.
And thank you,
Congratulations, Mabruk.
gentlemen.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ahlan. Pleasure.